28. Acts chapter 28, if you would please. On this side. A few things. I still have the handout. Got so many things here. Let's set something down. I got the handout for the Herod family, if anybody still wants any of those. Somebody, I think Doug asked, does it look like one of those West Virginia family trees, you know? I don't know about that. I'm not from West Virginia, so I don't know what that's supposed to mean there. But here's the Herod family layout if y'all want any of that information. I still found I had a couple more of these. I had about 3 more of these, the Life of Paul, this brochure I had gotten for y'all, for those who sign up for them. I got about 3 left. And if you're interested in that, that's $4.50 a piece if you want that. I'm trying to get all the commercials out of the way first. I got one more commercial for you here in a second. I'll show it to you. These are Baptist New Testament commentary series. I've got all 7 of these myself. I brought one to show you. They use the King James Version, and they're from this publisher here, but I buy them from Scripture Truth, just a little cheaper. I mean, the evangelist we had here, I can't remember his name. First name was Mike, and I can't remember his last name. I keep getting it mixed up. Mike Clark or Mike. Is that it? All right, got it right. I kept wanting to say Mike Evans. He had those there with him. I thought it was interesting. So I've gotten those myself. Not that my wife wants me to have more books in the house, but I do have more books in the house. But because I really like these. These are done. And each, what's interesting about these, and I showed Pastor Monteith, that each, say for instance, if you're doing like 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Colossians, and Philippians, they're done by different preachers that specialize, maybe have a specialty about that passage. It's not done by one person, is what I'm saying. They're done by pastors, as how they did these commentary series. And that just recently, 2 of them just came out this month. So it's kind of a slow process. But I just want to share that with you for information. But to go with that, I print out some information for you about that if you wanted that information, if you're interested. All right, let's get to the lesson. We're in chapter 28, verses 1 through 16. I took this chapter and divided this up a little bit. And you think, well, we're only going to cover 16 verses. Well, hopefully you'll see something in the 16 verses, and then we'll pick up on the rest, Lord willing, next week. But I'll do my best. I'm going fishing and camping this coming week, so that may be a challenge trying to pull a lesson together. So it might be a review next week. So I'm just laying out the hint there. And then I know everybody says, are you teaching today? Are you teaching today? Yeah, I'm teaching today. I'll teach, Lord willing, next week. But the following week, which is the end of the month, we have to help our daughter move, so I will not be able to do that week. I'll probably be here that Sunday, but we have to move her and all that. So we went towards Rome. What encouraged you to press onwards? What encouraged you to keep going on? This passage comes from, so we went toward Rome. You'll see that in Acts chapter 28 that we're in here. So think about that. This passage here that Paul wrote, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Where is Paul at in this stage of our story that we've been going through? Where is he at now? Pardon? No, he's not in prison. They've been shipwrecked and they're on an island. And if you're in Acts chapter 28, which if you want to turn there now, Melita, and modern day it's called Malta. But yeah, that's where he's at this point. And think about that, being shipwrecked, all these guys are with him together, 276 total are on the ship, and they all survived, of course. Because the Lord promised that not one hair would be lost throughout this whole process, that they would all survive. So they're shipwrecked on this island there. And to think about that, what if you were shipwrecked? And what if you had gone through all of this and gone through a storm, been in a storm for 2 weeks, and now you're shipwrecked, the boat's gone. Now you're on an island, you got to figure out, what is this island where I'm at? So if you turn to Acts chapter 28, it says in verse 1, and when they were escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita. You come shipwreck on an island and you don't know where you're at. You're trying to figure out, where am I at? What kind of people are here? You know, what am I dealing with? So the way to Syracuse, I broke this down like the lesson about how these passages are. The way to Syracuse, the way to Petulia, and the way to Rome. And that's how we'll tackle this lesson this morning with you. So their travel plans initially, and here's their travel plans. We showed this the other week. And if you saw that, after Acts chapter 27, we covered this whole territory, this whole trip here going this way. So they went this, we followed all of this here, all the way to here. So now they're shipwrecked and they're on this island here called Melita, as Acts said, but it's Malta present day. So today we're going to cover from here to Rome, which they're going to make this path that you see right here. So that's what we're going to cover this morning and what happens along the way there. So the way to Syracuse. They're on this island called Malta, or as Acts says, Melita. A little bit about this island. It's only 17 miles long. It's about 9 miles across. Now I try to look up somewhere around here so we can relate to that. How big these areas are around here? Because we got Newport News, we got Hampton, we got all this Yorktown, all this combined together. So pick out one of these cities that you think might be close to that. Probably Newport News is probably close to that. A long city like that and kind of wide like that. So if you didn't have anybody else, didn't have Hampton, Yorktown, North, all this other area, just think of that. But this is not as populated as Newport News, of course, back then. But this area right here today it's called St. Paul's Bay, and they think that's where they had landed at, in this area here. Their shipwreck. They're pretty sure that's where they were at. This is the certain island. When Paul spoke about in Acts chapter 27, verse 26, when he told the people there, hey, we're going to survive, and we're going to be on a certain island, because Acts chapter 27, verse 6 says, howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. Don't know which island it is, but Paul said we will be on an island, what he told them. And something else, in Acts chapter 28, verse 2, and we'll get there in a second, they were barbarous people. They were Phoenicians who did not speak Greek. And think who's writing this book. Who's writing the book of Acts? Luke. And Luke is what? He's a doctor, and his background is his ethnic background. Pardon? No. He was Greek. He was a Gentile. He was Greek. Was he not? And so he's expressed, these people don't speak Greek. So people don't speak Greek and don't speak their Latin, which is, for the Romans as well. Because Greek was what? Greek was the national, or not the national, but international language. The universal language was Greek. And these people didn't speak that. So he referred to them as barbarous people. Okay? Because we think of barbarous, there are barbarians walking around with spears and whatever else, going around like that. But if you see this passage here, how are they? How do they really treat these people? Here you got a bunch of shipwrecked guys who land on your island, and how do they treat them? You're on somebody's strange island. You might wind up being their slaves, or you might be killed. You think about it. But they're on this island here, and how are they treated? In verse 2 it says, and the barbarous people shewed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. These people were interesting, weren't they? They reached out, 276 guys who get washed ashore. They don't know them. They don't know each other. But they do what? They prepare fires. They help them set the fires up, kind of get them warmed, because they just got out of the ocean. And it's probably a little cool being in the ocean as well. And these people, what did Dr. Luke say here? He said, shewed us no little kindness. Not just a little bit. What he's trying to say, they showed us a lot of kindness of what they did. These people that we thought, well, they might make us slaves, or they might kill us. No, they didn't. They reached out to them, were kind to them. Were they saved people? Were they Christians? Nope, they weren't. They didn't even know the gospel yet. But yet they reached out and were kind to Paul and the others on that ship that had survived this. And here's the present day picture of St. Paul's Bay. This is how it's built up around the city and all that's built up around this area. I found this just to give you an idea of what it looks like today, that area there. So Paul's impression on the islanders, to think about that. And the idea of this lesson is always to think about, how does Paul relate to other people all the time through his travels, his journeys, as he goes through? So how does he make an impression on the islanders? So let's look at this passage here. In verse 3, and when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. Now, what would you have thought when you saw that? That's it. He's a goner. That's it. And that guy's a goner. He must be really bad, man. He's a goner. You know? The snake bite. And what did they say in the next passage here? And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. So what was their viewpoint? What was the islanders' viewpoint about what happened?
He was getting what he deserved.
Yeah, he is a murderer. So a murderer deserves what? Deserves death. And so he thought he was going to escape from the sea, and the sea didn't get rid of him. That snake will get him now. He's a goner now. And that's their mindset about this. But how does Paul respond to this? What does it say here? Let's see. Verse 5. And he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Now, I hate to say this. If this was Pastor Coffee and the snake got a hold of him.
CPR.
You're saying CPR would have to be performed right there. But Paul just shook it off into the fire. How would you respond if you got bit by a snake? We might both be in the fire, to tell you the truth, you know. I don't know, but he just kind of shook it off into the fire. It's amazing how he just, I don't know if it's nonchalant or however you want to say it, he just shook it off to get rid of it, you know. And they were just amazed. The barbarians were amazed. What did the islanders believe? They said, in verse 6, howbeit they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. How quickly they changed in what they saw and their perception of what they saw of Paul. And they didn't see him die. And they knew about this snake. They knew this was a venomous snake. Like, it's not going to take long. He's going to be a goner. But it didn't happen, did it? And how the Lord protected Paul through this.
John, not to get off the subject.
Yeah.
Ellie and I was talking yesterday. I've read this and everything about the snake. And I told him, I said, honey, I said, did they have snake venom at hospitals in case you get snake bitten? He said, yeah. He said, they have it. Because, you know, all the TV, I don't know if y'all seen it, not here lately on news, has been showing about all these snakes appearing everywhere. They say they're out more now than ever because of the weather, I guess. And they said that your backyard, said was their habitat. And they don't want you killing them, they want you to call the, what do you call it? Animal control act. Yes, ma'am, animal control act. But I'm not waiting for no animal control act.
Well, I gotta say, I have seen a couple in my backyard recently, too. Call Terry over.
Remember in Mark it says they should take up serpents and not harm them.
That's right. That's right.
Better than a good example of it.
Better them than me? Yeah, true.
But he wasn't trying to pick you up.
Right. Yeah, I read somewhere about there's snake handler, people that are churches that are snake handler churches and all that. And I don't know if y'all ever familiar with Sand Mountain in Alabama. If anybody's familiar with that area? Yeah, they're kind of known for being little snake handlers up that way. My family was from Alabama, my dad's side of the family. My dad says, we don't even go to Sand Mountain, but they were known to have snake handlers up that way. I don't know about you, I'm not going to be handling a snake. No more than I have to, but I have done so. Yes?
I think it's interesting too, and I've never paid any attention to this before, but these being, they're heathen people, and certainly
Mm-hmm.
They go from he's a murderer to he's a god.
Yep.
And, they're wrong on both counts. And, because they don't have the truth, then I think that's an example and an illustration of how warped people's thinking can be, even today,
Mm-hmm.
when people reject the truth of God's word.
That's right. Very much so. And it is like extreme, from a murderer to a god. I mean, that's how they view this.
I think a lot of those islanders back then, sometimes they live their lives with, according to a lot of superstition.
Oh, yeah.
Things too. And then of course Paul, he wasn't afraid because he knew that it wasn't his time because he had not fulfilled what God planned for him. So he didn't sweat it. He just shook the snake off.
That's right. And that's we'll get to that part here, but that's what I'm going to get to, is that he knew, he was encouraged by what? By the Lord had told him he was going to be where? He's going to go to Rome. And snake's not, the shipwreck's not going to do it. The mob back in Jerusalem and Caesarea, those places weren't going to do it. And the shipwreck didn't do it. And the snake's not going to do it. He said, because God gave him a promise that he was going to be in Rome, He had his eyes focused on the author and finisher of his faith, on the Lord Jesus Christ, no matter what. So Paul's impact on the islanders. He heals the healing of the chief man's father. And go down a little bit further. In the same quarters were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, others also which had diseases in the island came and were healed, who also honored us with many honors. And when we departed, they laden us with such things as were necessary. How did Paul address this guy? How did he deal with his father? The sickness of his father. He went in, he did what? He prayed to show that he was honoring the Lord, He healed others, and the islanders affected them because they did what? They gave him all kinds of whatever he needed, took care of him. Not just him, but the 276 soldiers, the Roman soldiers that were with him, and the other people that were on that ship. We don't know all the people that were on the ship. The crew, the centurion we know was there. We know there's some Roman soldiers, probably some other prisoners as well, but they were taken care of. Isn't it amazing how when Paul's life affects many people all the time, always was affecting people?
More than likely, most of the majority were not saved.
Right.
So,
That's true. Most of that crew on the survivors were not even saved, We don't know, maybe a few got saved along the way, and I think they would be getting saved after seeing what was going on with Paul. So to Syracuse, in verses 11 through 12, it says, and after 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days. So I show you this map here, and I'll give you a few information. I want to see how quick that came up. Here's Malta, and here's Syracuse right here. This is Sicily right here, and see right there. It's about 60 miles. They took that boat and went this way, the ship, and they left after 3 months. So probably about late February. We talked about this earlier, and I'll show you that illustration again about the shipping, when the sailing times were. But probably about late February, the best I can figure out with information, when they made this. So back it up for a second. When Paul and that storm was going on, before they got to that storm, remember what happened before? And Paul warned the captain and warned the centurion about what? About not to go on. Let's stay right here because, basically the winter is coming on. It's not the best time to go sailing, but they ignored that, right? Remember, they ignored that.
they had a calm before the storm, so they thought it was going to be good sailing.
Right. But they ignored his information, and they ignored what they knew about this area right here as well. They thought, well, we can make it. So what winds up happening? They still had to wait 3 months. See what I'm saying? They still were delayed. They lost a ship, they lost their cargo, lost everything they had, and they had to find another ship, and they still had to wait 3 months because they wouldn't listen. Just a side note, I noticed this. Yeah.
Illustration for us, how when we're running ahead of the Lord, doing it on our own time,
Mhm.
many times we would just be better off to wait on Him, to wait on His time, which would be perfect time.
Right. And we do. We have a tendency to do that. Listen, I think I know better, so I'll do it myself. And the Lord says, I want you to do it this way and take His time. We get a little impatient. Like to go through the drive-thru, you don't get it in, less than 30 seconds. This drive-thru is slow. What's wrong with these people, Get the lead out. We can't get it fast enough. And same thing with our lives. We get so busy, go, go, go. The ship of Alexander, it had Castor and Pollux. These are the two, they were considered the sons of Zeus. And they're called the Gemini that you see in the constellation in the sky because there's two stars, which is Castor and Pollux. These were the twins, which represents Gemini in the sky as well. But their superstition was, not Paul and his group, but I'm just saying as far as these sailors on this kind of a ship, was that this was the one that would take care of them, protect them, because it was under this Castor and Pollux, because they were the sons of Zeus. So remember this thing I showed you last week. Let me pop them all up here. So about this time here, about Acts chapter 28, verse 11, it says, after 3 months we departed in a ship, possibly late February, trying to timing. We don't know exactly the timing, we're just trying to figure out the timing here. So I say late February, probably early March, might have been close to the time. Even though it moves into the dangerous point of travel, but still, remember that time period there, they shouldn't be traveling. They kind of pretty well ceased traveling. And for 3 months, they had ceased traveling until they came across this one boat that was going on. So what have we learned? After the shipwreck, the Apostle Paul was what? Busy serving the others by gathering wood. Isn't that interesting? Now, even though the islanders gathered and started a fire for them, he's busy doing what? He ain't just sitting around the fireplace, drinking hot cocoa and cooling it, taking it easy. He's busy. He led by example. Paul was always busy, engaged in doing something, it seems like. Not just being, because I'm the Apostle Paul, y'all should reverence me, or some kind of attitude like that. He didn't have that attitude. He had a servant's heart in so many ways to do this. The islanders made a judgment of the Apostle Paul based on the circumstances. Bad things happen to bad people, was their mindset. Do we have that mindset? Think about it. When things happen, they must have done something wrong, right? How many times have we done that? May not have said it, but may have thought, yeah, they got something bad in their history, back in their history there, man. There's something bad about them. That's why that happened. That's got to be it. How many times we've had that mindset? Now, the passage you talked about, Matthew, I think, 5:11, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. It's interesting that they said falsely about Paul, you're a murderer. Next moment, then you're a god, But they made that rash judgment about him because of what? Got bit by a snake, you must be a murderer, you deserve it, bad things happen to bad people. Hopefully we don't have that mindset. But it's so easy for us to do that, isn't it? I know we don't want to shake our heads up and down. We don't want to say, I know. We all do it. Very judgmental. Because we look at the circumstances and judge by the circumstances. That must be why it happened. Right? The Apostle Paul strove to help others, not for personal gain, but to glorify the Lord. And I want you to think about that after the shipwreck, how he is serving, going to gather wood, and always in helping it, like he helped the people there. He healed, he could have said, Publius could have said, my dad's sick. He says, okay. So what? What do you want me to do about it? No, Paul said, where's he at? He goes in there and prays with him, heals him. And then all these other people start coming. They start bringing all their sick people they got with diseases all to him. Paul says, I ain't got time for y'all. I'm too busy. I'm too important. I ain't got time for y'all. That wasn't his attitude. Just think how overwhelming that is with all these people coming to him with sicknesses and diseases, whatever they might have had, and having him heal these people in this island. Paul always was looking, how can God be glorified? Was not God glorified through this? I believe he was glorified through all this, seeing the man of God serving like he did. I got this from this book here. I have another book called Acts, the Church of Life by Paul Chappell. I got a couple of his books. They're commentaries I got, but I thought it was interesting. I'll show it to you. It is not unusual for God's servant to be branded. D.L. Moody was called Crazy Moody. Billy Sunday was accused of only preaching for money. Charles Stanley wrote in his book, The Source of My Strength, I was struck in the face by a man yelling and cursing about my leadership at a church meeting. At 84 years of age, after 50 years in the ministry, W.A. Criswell had a former staff member refer to him, his one-time mentor, as a power-hungry tyrant. Isn't it amazing? Men of God who's taken a stand and do what's right, and you got people out there calling them names, and well, Charles Stanley said, somebody struck him in the face in a business meeting. It's amazing how people do against each other, especially against the man of God, Just like these people, they judge Paul. Well, he got bit by a snake. They're branding him in a sense. He did bad, he deserves bad. That's what it is. He deserves it. So let's move on. The way to Puteoli. From Syracuse to Rhegium is about 70 miles. I don't know if you saw that arrow, but from here, Syracuse to this part here. This is part of Italy right now, at this very tip down here. This is where they're going to. In this passage here, if you look, and it says in verse 13, and from thence we fetched the compass and came to Rhegium, and after one day the south wind blew, and we came the next day to Puteoli. Now, when it said there, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I apologize, but the Rhegium, what did it say about it? Nothing. Just said, we went here. Very uneventful, nothing outstanding, just a little bit of a trip there we made. But they get to this next port here. So they go on to this next place. The arrow will show up here in a second. See that next area? They go from here to this Puteoli. That's where they're going to go. It's about 175 miles. Of course, they go by ship, of course, they're doing this. It's about a 2-day trip. Josephus mentions that there's a Jewish colony. Josephus wrote I don't know if you've ever seen books, The Writings of Josephus, written back in the early 1st century or something like that, way back then. But he wrote there was a Jewish colony in this area right here. So if we go back to the passage here, let's go back down there in verse 14, where we found brethren and were desired to tarry with them 7 days, and we went toward Rome. They found brethren where? Where did they find these brethren at? Puteoli, or however you want to pronounce the name. Had Paul ever been there before? No. But Christianity had been there. Somebody had shared the gospel there, and there was Christians there already. The gospel had reached this area already. They found Christians there, and they stayed for 7 days. Now, they stayed for 7 days. You know what? Who's in charge? The centurion's in charge of Paul, right? He's in charge of this detail of taking Paul to Rome. So the centurion is what? He's been very gracious with Paul. He's been very kind to him. And he allows Paul, seemingly, to stay. They stay there for 7 days, to be allowed to stay there for whatever reason. But he allows that. I'm just curious if that centurion guard ever got saved, how well he treated Paul. I'm just curious if he ever did. So just like the trip from Syracuse to Rhegium was uneventful, there are days in our lives when it seems like it's kind of quiet. And don't you like a quiet day? Or you just like your days to be hectic? I don't know about you. Sometimes you just want to be a quiet day. Make it easy, get through life, have a nice day every once in a while. And this was an uneventful trip on that part there. Just an illustration there to think about. The finding of Christians along our life's journey should be a blessing to each other. Shouldn't it? When you travel somewhere, isn't it nice to meet fellow believers? Because you go to different areas and you don't know those people there. They're totally strangers to you. Now, you may have gone to a church. You may have visited a church, and hopefully you've gone to a church somewhere and you traveled. But what if you go to a restaurant there and you meet somebody in a restaurant and they get to talking and they're fellow believers? Don't you have that? There's that bond there because we have the same Savior. There's that brother and sister relationship we have there in the Lord that we have immediately, In this passage here in verse 14, he says, we're desired to tarry with them. I thought it was interesting when he said, we're desired to tarry with them. When they met those believers there, it was what? They desired to tarry with them. Are we so busy or think we are so important that we do not care to be around other believers? I don't know about you. I get busy, and I'm not proud. I mean, you seem like our days get busy, busy, go, go, go. And we have a tendency to do that. But having time to have fellowship one with another is important, is it not? I mean, we can all live in our own little worlds and put our little blinders up, and I'm going to come in and sit in my pew and get up and walk away and go out the door and say, nobody's been friendly to me. We can do that, can we not? And then we think, well, nobody's friendly to me. Nobody's nice to me. But have I reached out? Have I been friendly? Have I walked across from the dark side to the other side and met somebody on the other side and shook hands with them? Say, how are you doing? The time we do shaking hands, sometimes you can't get around. I understand, we can't do that. But sometimes we got to kind of get out of our little comfort zone and reach over and meet somebody else. I'll never forget the time we first coming to church here. We sat back in that area somewhere, and there was a couple sitting in front of us. I said, glad to have y'all here. We'd been new members just for a little bit. Glad to have y'all here. He says, we're members. I'm thinking, I haven't seen y'all. I didn't say that. But I said, in my mind, I said, I haven't seen you. I've been here for a few months, never seen you around. They said they were members. They sounded offended because I approached them like that. But we got to learn to desire to be with others. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and in the breaking of bread and in prayers. Isn't that how the early church was? An early church that starts out does what? They want to be together. They want to help each other. They're very active. They're very serving together. And that's the way we should be at all times. Don't lose that first love of how starting a church. What if Maranatha was just starting out? How would we be if we were just starting out? We've been around how many? Almost 40 years, I guess, at least. But what if we were just starting out? How would we be? Would we not desire to be around each other more? You know, just like they did in the early church. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and in fellowship in that way. All right, the third part of the trip, way to Rome. From Puteoli to Appiforum is about 130 miles. It's a 5-day journey, and it's done by land. It's done by the Appian Way. Now, the Appian Way is one of their pathways that they had. The Romans had built this network of Roman roads. And all roads do what? Go back to Rome. That's the idea. So in Rome, in the Roman Empire, they made all these Roman roads to do that so they can get information and travel across the whole empire constantly. A great network that they had. And this is one of those things called the Appian Way. And that red line shows you, it went from here to here. That's the Appian Way. There's others on here. I didn't show all the others. It would be a network of highways it would look like to you in a way. But this is the one they got onto. Christians came from Rome to meet Apostle Paul. In verse 15 it says, and from thence, when the brethren heard of us, they came to meet us as far as Appian Forum and the 3 taverns, whom when Paul saw, he thanked God and took courage. Christians came from Rome, came down there to Paul. That's a good bit of a distance even from there. They haven't got close to Rome. They're getting closer to Rome, but they're not there yet. But these other Christians come and visit to be an encouragement to them. Here you got this entourage of, I don't know if by this time, are all the 276 people together? Probably not. They probably all went in different directions. The seamen probably found another boat, because they're on land now. And so now you got what? The centurion, the guards, the prisoners. They're on their way to Rome. That's their destination with Paul. That's where they're heading to. But the rest of them, they probably went different directions by this time. This place, Appiforum, was a prominent marketplace. This is a modern-day picture of the old road, what it looks like, the Appian Way. Notice the stones, how they laid those stones out to make that pathway there. That was done with the local unions? Nope. The local unions were slave labor. That's how they did all that. That's how they built these things, using slave labor to get this done. The 3 taverns. I showed you here just to give you an idea. So it's called Appian Forum that we have here is called the Forum of Appius. It's from here to here to the Three Taverns. And both of these were kind of like stops along the way, like traveling, just a rest area, whatever you want to call it, but making these travels here. It's about 10 miles here. The Apostle Paul was encouraged by the coming of the fellow believers, verse 15. We already read that part. So they get to Rome. From the Three Taverns to Rome is about 33 miles, and the population in Rome is about 450,000 people. That's a lot of people in a condensed area there. Let's go look back in verse 16. And when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, but Paul was suffered to dwell by himself with a soldier that kept him. Now, we'll pick up on verse 16 next week again, but I just want to get you to the point. Now he's finally made it to Rome. Can you imagine Paul, after all this time serving the 3 missionary journeys he's been on, the years he's been out there serving the Lord, wherever, for over, 15 years or so, about that, I think, we've figured. Now he's finally made to the destination the Lord said he would come to. He would be able to come to Rome to do what? To be a witness in Rome. But there was already Christian brethren and sisters already there. People had gotten saved. And they traveled and went to go see Paul. And kind of like an entourage, not just the Roman soldiers and centurions, but this entourage of Christians coming along with Paul to Rome. So what do we learn? The fellow believers went out of their way. They left their busy lives, their families, whatever they might have done, and came and walked with the Apostle Paul in that entourage. You think about that. I'm taking a vacation for a couple of days, boss. I'll be out of town for a little bit. I'm going down to see Paul, and I'll be back in a few days. They didn't have vacation time. Didn't have leave time. They just had to stop where they were doing their work, whatever it was, and go and make that trip. Think of the blessing you can be when a fellow believer needs encouragement. Do we need encouragement? Do you need encouragement? Are you just, no, I don't need anybody. I don't need nobody. Nobody at all. You're lying to yourself, aren't you? We all need encouragement, no matter who we are. Our pastors need encouragement. Our workers on the bus, children's ministry, whoever they are, Sunday school teacher, whoever that might be, each one of us in this room need encouragement. Throughout the church need encouragement by somebody somewhere. And we need to be an encouragement, a blessing one to another. Remember, the Lord's promise to the Apostle Paul a few years earlier, we talked about this briefly. And the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul. For as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome." I think he always held on to that. The Lord making that appearance to him, talking to him, before the shipwreck and the storm and all that, and the months they stayed on this island. I always think he held on to that, thinking, I'm going to be in Rome, because the Lord said, I'm going to be in Rome. And I'm going to be what? I'm not just going to walk into Rome, but I'm going to be a witness in Rome. Here's an example of encouragement. Abraham Lincoln. Despite his busy schedule during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln often visited the hospitals to cheer the wounded. On one occasion, he saw a young fellow who was near death. "Is there anything I can do for you?" asked the compassionate president. "Please write a letter to my mother," came the reply. Unrecognized by the soldier, the chief executive sat down and wrote as the youth told him what to say. The letter read, "My dearest mother, I was badly hurt while doing my duty, and I won't recover. Don't sorrow too much for me. May God bless you and Father. Kiss Mary and John for me." The young man was too weak to go on, so Lincoln signed the letter for him and then added this postscript, "Written for your son by Abraham Lincoln." Asking to see the note, the soldier was astonished to discover who had shown him such kindness. "Are you really our president?" he asked. "Yes," was the quiet answer. "Now, is there anything else I can do?" The lad feebly replied, "Will you please hold my hand? I think it would help to see me through to the end." The tall, gaunt man granted the request, offering him warm words of encouragement until death stole in with the dawn. Here was a man who was busy, but took time to be an encouragement to a guy who was passing away, a young guy. You know, no matter how important we are, no matter who we are, do we take time for others to be an encouragement? And that's what I said earlier to you. What encourages you to go on? It's the encouragement of other people. It's the encouragement of the gospel. You know, we have what? We've got to focus on our Lord Jesus Christ, and we're looking towards him. You know, Paul went through a whole lot of mess. And we all know that. We've talked about in 2 Corinthians about all the things he'd gone through. You think about it, how many of us would have just gave up? You know? But he still kept what? He still kept going on. He still kept being a blessing to other people. He still kept doing things for others all the time. For what? For the gospel's sake. That's what he did. Anybody have any comments, any questions? You're done a little bit early. I was surprised. I didn't think I'd make this early. But I know you're all anxious to get out here now that you're done early. We've never been out early. Getting out of school early. Yeah. Anybody, anything? Well, hopefully we learned something that will help us. Like I said, I've got these handouts up here, and I say you're welcome to come up here and take a look at that book if you want to see what that book looks like. Just get an idea and the feel of that as well. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer and we'll be dismissed.